Welcome to the National Center for Biblical Parenting. My name is Scott Taransky, and this is Joanne Miller, and our objective is to help you understand a little bit more about your kids. That's our goal, and we do that one child at a time because every child needs a specific action plan. It's hard to just have one plan that's going to fit all kids. So what we're going to do in this particular session, we're going to focus on one family. We have Charma on the phone, and we've got a number of people listening in to what's going on. We're going to spend quite a bit of time here with Charma in our hour, trying to address issues and helping her understand what's going on with her child. And then we're going to open the phone lines and let you ask questions. You'll be able to do that in some ways. You can, if nothing else, you can use the chat function in the webinar if you'd like to get to us, okay? But there's also, you may be able to raise your hand or something like that in the course of things, and we can acknowledge you or have you ask a question. All right, Charma, I need to ask you a couple of questions before we go forward. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Can you tell me what is the name of the child and how old is this child that we're going to talk about?
It's my son's name is Caden. He is 9 years old. He'll turn 10 this spring.
Okay, so he's 9 years old, and what is his name? Caden?
Caden.
How do you spell that?
C-A-D-E-N.
Okay, Caden. All right, very good. And Charma, I need to know a little bit about your family. Are we talking about a single-parent family, or are you a traditional family? I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, great. We're a traditional family, mom and dad. My husband and I have been married for almost 12 years.
Great.
We have another child, a younger child. He's 5 years old, and his name is Christian.
Okay.
He is a great kid. He has very high-functioning autism.
Okay.
We live in
Christian. Is this Christian who has high-functioning autism? Is that correct?
It is Christian, the younger one.
Okay. I just need to jot that down. All right. Now, are Caden and Christian the natural-born children of you and your husband?
They are.
Okay. Very good. Why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit more about? I think we're talking about Caden right now. Is that correct?
We are talking about Caden, correct, the older child.
All right. Why don't you tell me what's going on in your family, and let's try to develop some solutions. What's going on?
Okay. Our family, Caden has been raised in a Christian home from day one. He's attended church, and, we've read to him the stories, the Bible stories, and we've, throughout our home, values and those kinds of things are integrated into how we deal with our children and teach our children. But in the last year or so, we've noticed his personality is shifting, it's changing, and we're very concerned about it because he a symptom of the problem is that he has become considerably more disrespectful, and this is completely against his nature of anything the way that he's been in the past. He will mouth off, talk back, rather than he's been taught to say yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am. And if he wants to question something, to say, Mom, I understand what you're telling me to do, and I will do it. However, can I ask you a question about it?
Okay.
That's the way that we've tried to teach him to respond to us if he does want to question something that we're, to get a reason or to have a better understanding of why we're asking him to do something. And that has been how he's related to us for quite some time until recently. And at this point, he will, comment under his breath or gets very red-faced and angry, will hold his breath, will make a very loud at times when he's very upset with something we've asked him to do. His grades this year have begun to drop, and he's not in a lot of trouble at school, but he is, he's having some issues of willful disobedience, something that a teacher has talked to him about repeatedly, like running in the hall, that he is choosing to continue to do. And that's, that's creating problems for him. He's in a fairly strict school. It's a charter school. And, they are while they're not a Christian school, they follow some of the very same guidelines that you would find in a Christian school with their discipline and their expectations for the children.
Okay.
And so, of course, because of some of the attitude issues that we're seeing with him at this time, that he's also having difficulty in school, which is creating more pressure in the home because, of course, we as parents want to see him be successful in school. And it's straining our relationship with him because we are putting a lot of pressure on him to, A, get his grades up, and B, listen to his teachers and obey what they're telling him.
Okay.
he just his attitude has really gone south.
Okay. Tell me, what kind of pressure have you put on him, and what does that mean? You put pressure on him?
A lot of talking tos, a lot of, stressing the importance of school. The kind of stuff that kids, I'm sure, don't want to hear about. Why school is important, and trying to relate it to, mom and dad have good jobs, and here's why we have good jobs, and here's what you need to do someday to be able to support your family, and you're not doing that right now. How are you going to do that when you're, in junior high and high school? When he comes home with discipline marks in his notebook, which is what they did at the school, depending on what the discipline marks are for, or if it's a repeat offense, or if it's how he reacts to the situation. He's a blamer. He tends to want to blame everybody else is the reason he got in trouble. And so we will respond by either taking away privileges such as TV or video games, but because our kids don't watch a lot of TV or play a lot of video games, that's not really that big of a deal to take away because they're only allowed 30 minutes a day. Or we will put him in his bed early. We try spanking, and recently my husband has grown increasingly frustrated and has resorted to just basically raising his voice and yelling. Okay. And me too at times. It's not just my husband. I mean, there's times I become so frustrated with his behaviors that I just completely lose it, and and I'm sure he has completely tuned us out at that point. And it's not, none of us are being productive at that point.
Okay. Is Caden on any medications?
We actually started him on medication last year in third grade when he began to have some academic problems because of the lack of being able to pay attention. We started him on a very low dose of Concerta, and right now he's at a 27, I believe.
So 27
milligrams of Concerta.
Okay. All right. How's his sleep going? In other words, do we have side effects to these medications that are creating a problem or not?
He did initially last year. We noticed that he's a very big eater. He's skinny as a rail, but he eats an enormous amount of food. And we noticed, of course, his eating diminished as well as he did have some trouble sleeping. But as time had worn on, that lasted about a month. And now he is back to the same eating patterns, the same sleeping patterns that he has always been at. Okay.
So he's settling in to the medication. It's working in that regard. Is he able to focus more?
In the regard that I have been asked repeatedly by the school or been told repeatedly that they feel that he needs to be on a higher dosage. That I've resisted because we're anti-medicine as much as we can be, but by the same token, he was having such difficulty, we felt it was absolutely necessary at the point that we decided to go forth with it.
Okay.
I've been pressured to increase the dosage because it's helping him, but he still has distractibility issues. He still has impulse issues.
All right, and we're not opposed to medication. Please don't think that's why I'm asking the questions. What we try to do, though, is use as many heart-based strategies as we can to make this work as we're working with a child. Let me ask some more questions about Caden. About what time does he go to bed at night now?
They're in bed by 7:30, asleep by 8 o'clock.
And is that easy for him? He's eager to. It sounds like he falls to sleep pretty easily.
So most nights, he's been in soccer, and just recently, soccer season was over, and it's very easy, after a hard soccer practice, to go to bed. If there's something on his mind, if he's thinking about something, he's concerned about something, he's stressed about something, he will lay in bed for upwards of 45 minutes just later thinking. But he's not complaining to me that he can't go to sleep. I think it's more of him not letting himself go to sleep.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, I experience that sometimes myself. What would you? Let's rate his anxiety level here for a moment. What kinds of things make him feel anxious?
Caden is a type A worrywart, your typical firstborn child. Because we've had so many challenges with his little brother, I think he takes the weight of the world on his shoulders, and then he gets frustrated because his little brother doesn't react, or his little brother has a really hard time with recalling names, for instance, and that's not difficult for Caden. The names of his friends, he knows all his friends. Christian doesn't. And so Caden gets really frustrated with his brother about just little silly things that come easy for Caden, but not so much for Christian. We had Christian in the same school as Caden initially, and it did not work out. Christian was not able to meet their standards because he does have the autistic breakdowns when he gets completely overstimulated or just overwhelmed with sensory information.
Mm-hmm.
And so we actually removed him from the school and put him in a different school away from Caden. I thought that would help Caden because I thought it was honestly stressing Caden more to have him there.
Makes sense.
Because his little brother was, causing problems. But it seems like the behaviors have magnified since we removed Christian from Caden's school.
All right, let's go back to in your home. Let me just ask another question about school. You're telling me that his marks at school are getting worse. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm talking about his academics. That's what I'm talking. He's not doing as well academically at school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you're also telling me...
He went from...
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say he went from his 9 weeks grade for last 9 weeks. He had all A's and B's, and he struggled in math. There was a situation with one of the teachers. They left and had to get a new teacher. So partly he did very well in math last year, so I'm not 100% sure. It's not just some situational things happening. However, we got his progress report last week, and all his grades had dropped tremendously. And he went from A in spelling to a C in spelling. He went from a B in social studies to a D, almost an F in social studies. And that's the progress report, not the 9 weeks, but, we're halfway through.
Sure.
So his science grade went from an A to almost a D. It's a low C right now. So everything has dropped tremendously just over the course of the last 9 weeks,
Okay.
half of the 9 weeks.
So academics are on the decline. What about his responsiveness to authority? I think you were telling me that he's having trouble with responding to authority at school. Is that correct?
He's not. His teachers tell me he's not disrespectful towards them.
Okay.
He doesn't, mouth off to them, or it's not hateful to them because I've asked and I've conferenced with them.
Okay.
But he is having trouble. His impulses are getting the better of him, so to speak, in that he wants to be first in line. So regardless of the consequences of the fact the teacher has already warned him that he needs to walk, it's more important is to get in line first. And so that outweighs the consequences of what the teacher has told him to do, as an example.
Okay, that makes sense. But the impulsivity, you're telling me, is the cause. He's not being defiant at school. He's being irresponsible or childish or in that regard with his impulsivity, and that's causing him to be a magnet for correction, it sounds like, right?
Correct. And at his school, once you've been corrected several times, they consider it willful disobedience when you continue the same behavior. Whether it's really truly willful disobedience or not, that's how they consider it at where he's currently at.
Yeah, all right. So in order for him to be successful at school, we're going to have to raise his ability to attend and to be tolerant and have self-control and be sensitive. Those are all heart qualities. We can do work in all of those areas because he's in a rather rigid school what you're telling me is that the school is interpreting his continual impulsivity as willful defiance. And then they're disciplining him for it, okay? All right, so what we're going to do, we need to help develop some more heart qualities in him. We'll come back to those in just a moment. The third area at school that I just want to ask about, what about his friends at school? Does he have good friends? Are you pleased with the way he's developing relationships? Does he choose friends wisely? Can he socially relate to people okay?
Yes, he does. He has a lot of friends. He's very athletic, so, of course, in our society that, breeds popularity when you have athleticism, and so he has, I would consider them to be good friends, good kids, not troublemakers, not the kids that are always, getting in trouble at school. And my husband and I both work outside the home. They're in before and after school care about 45 minutes in the morning and about 40, depending on traffic, 45 minutes to an hour in the afternoons.
Okay.
And they go to a very good program on where my husband and I both work for the government, and so they go to a very good before and after school program on a military installation.
Okay, great. Let's go back to now him inside your home, because you're telling me he mouths off, he talks back, and he reacts by holding his breath, screams, or does this kind of gritting his teeth kind of screaming sometimes. I want to know where that happens. Does that happen when you give him an instruction that he doesn't want to do? Like when you say to him, Caden, it's time, you need to work on your homework now. Might we see that a response at that point?
That is correct. And it's typically, I have already asked him, and we've actually gone to the Parenting is Heart Work seminar, the 4 or 5 hour seminar.
Yes.
So we started to implement some of those strategies, making sure that we were in the same room with him when we gave him an instruction and made eye contact and make sure he looked at us. So it's after we've already told him, typically, hey, it's time to put away whatever you're doing, you know, in that situation. Time to put it away and work on your homework. We need to get this done. And it's after he's ignored his instructions the first time, and then we have to go in and say, I want you to stop what you're doing right now and start doing, you know, and come with me so we can begin your homework. And it's typically in that second time that we've told him to do it, that he's ignored us the first time, and that we've had to, you know, not when I say elevator voice, not necessarily we haven't yelled at him in that situation, but we've made it known that, okay, it's time, let's go.
Okay.
And typically,
at that moment,
if he's really into...
When you've given him an instruction in that moment, is he not doing it because he doesn't want to, or he's involved in another activity, or he doesn't feel like it? Why would you say that Caden, what would he say? Why isn't he going ahead and doing what you asked him to do?
Well, I honestly think it's a combination of the two. He does get very involved in his play, building things and constructing or playing outside, pretending like he's shooting squirrels with his little pretend toys and stuff. So he would rather be doing that than what it is I'm asking him to go do. And so I think typically because he does not want to do whatever it is I'm asking him to do, that's when he becomes angry about it, because he's so involved in what he is doing, and it's what I'm telling him to do is less fun than what, you know, he is currently doing.
Okay.
That's when I see it happen typically.
All right. Now, when he has one of these responses or reactions, he mouths off, he talks back, so he's verbal with you. In those moments, does he then respond to you and come and do his homework, or what happens in the midst of that? Does he get corrected, or where do we go at that point?
Trying to think of a recent example. Typically, he is mouthing off as he's walking towards doing whatever it is that we've told him to do.
Okay.
He doesn't completely refuse to do it. He ends up doing it, but it's with a very bad attitude, very hateful, you know, jerky movements, and very just, I don't like you, and I'm making it known that I don't like you right in this moment.
Okay. So he's using some kind of verbal, kind of revenge tactics to get back at you, even though he's complying. So he's being passively aggressive or even actively aggressive, even though he's doing what you asked him to do.
Correct. I mean, most recently, one of the things that he said that, you know, my husband did spank him for was, he said, and he's never hit me, but he said, I just want to, and he stopped himself, and my husband knew what he was, you know, getting ready to finish and say, you know, of course, I don't think Cade would actually ever hit either one of us, but he was angry enough to say something like that.
Okay. All right, let's do this. I want to go ahead. I'm going to control my screen to you so you can see some things I'm going to write down.
Actually, I'm not on I'm on the phone. So how do I get to?
That's okay. Don't worry about it. I will talk you through anything that I'm writing down. Okay, so that you understand.
Okay, great.
What's going on here. But what we're going to do is we're going to move Caden from point A on a map. That's where we are. And we're going to try to get him over here to point B on a map. And in order to move from point A to point B, we have to identify what point A looks like and what point B looks like. So far you've told me several things about point A. One is that he's impulsive. You've also told me that he's angry when he doesn't get his way, or when you force him to do something he doesn't like. You've told me that he's, let's see, what are some other things you said to me here? At least in this category, we've got other things we could work on, but let's stick with those. Now what we want from him at point B, that's what we're looking for. We want to get to point B with him on a map, in a heart map. This is a heart way of approaching this. So we're asking ourselves, what do we want him to do at point B? Well, compliance we're already getting, all right? So compliance is important, but we're already getting compliance in his life. We want more than compliance. What we want is responsiveness to authority, your authority in particular, okay? That's one thing we want, responsiveness. We also want an attitude change, that is a responsive attitude as well. Does that make sense? That's what we're trying to go to. We're trying to get from point A over to point B on a map. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to help Caden understand where we're going and what we're doing here. So this is going to require some thinking on your part first, and then for you and your husband to sit down and have a meeting with Caden. We're going to talk about this with Caden, and we're going to say at point B, we're going to talk about why we want to get there. In other words, we're trying to help him. Let's just call this for the sake of discussion, and you may elaborate on this yourself. We're going to talk about this as having a good attitude in difficult situations. Okay, or a good attitude when he doesn't feel like it, or something like that. So that's how we're going to define that. And what does a good attitude look like? How can anybody have a good attitude when they don't feel like it? I mean, I'm sure that you are faced with the same challenges, especially if you work for the government. I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but when you have to have a good attitude in the midst of something you don't want to do, or when somebody's doing something that's hard for you, you have to have a good attitude. What does that look like? Okay, so there's visioning is one of the things we're going to do with Caden. We need to sit down with him, and we're going to say, Caden, we have a problem. I can tell we have a problem sometimes, and I can tell you're not happy about this. The problem is sometimes you do what I ask you to do. When I ask you to do your homework, you do it, and that's great. I'm really glad you do. But something's happening inside of you that's causing you to feel like having a bad attitude and treating us unkindly or something like that. And that's not helpful. It's not helpful for us. It makes things miserable around here for us. But it also, I can tell you're not a happy person, and I want to try to help you to be stronger on the inside so that you can be happy even when things aren't going the way you'd like. Does that make sense, Caden? Okay, so I want to help you with this. What can we do to help you have a better attitude inside your heart? So this is a heart-based approach we're doing. So visioning becomes a very important part of the process. Now, another part of the process, by the way, is firmness. And it sounds to me like you guys are doing a lot of the firmness part of things, because firmness takes place at point A on the map, making point A uncomfortable. I think you're probably already doing the firmness things which say to him, we can't live this way. You're already telling me some of the consequences you're using, the things you're doing, are saying, we're not happy with what's going on. This is not acceptable. So I think you're probably doing okay in the firmness department. What I'd like to see us do is a little more of the visioning on the other side that helps the child see why we're going where we're going to offset this. This will help you too. I mean, if you think through this and you think, why do we want him to get here anyway? Not just so I can feel better and he didn't give me a hard time, but this will help him to do better in his life too. He'll feel better about this. So that's another piece of the puzzle. Another part that you're going to do with him is to pray with him or pray for him. I mean, hopefully he'll pray with you, but if that's the case, every morning when you get up, you want to be praying for him because God is the one that changes his heart. So you're going to be praying that God will give you relational connectedness with him, that God will give you some techniques or ideas that will help him to change. Your prayer for him every day works because it puts you in tune with what God wants in his life. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm sure you're already praying for him, so I'm not trying to belittle you at all here. I'm just saying that needs to be an important part of your plan. Now, the next part, and this is where I want to spend some time, is the teaching part of your plan. We have to teach Caden how to get from point A to point B. Caden, I would say to him, Caden, we need to develop a plan for you. This is a Caden plan, okay? It's different than a plan we could develop for any other child. This has to be a plan that works for you. Now, I can tell you what other children do in this kind of situation, but let's try to help you. First of all, Caden, what is the problem here? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Now, this is non-critical listening on your part. You're not trying to find things that he said that are wrong or something and try to criticize him for this. You're trying to help him solve an internal problem that he has. Caden, sometimes you have a hard time when I ask you to do something. In fact, remember earlier today when I asked you to do your homework? And you gave me some resistance at that point. You did it. I was grateful. But you remember you said those unkind things to me? Well, you said, I hate you, or I don't know what are some of the other things you said that he says. But you said those things, and those were really mean things. Tell me what's going on in your heart at that point. Why is it that you feel the need to make those kind of statements when you're going this direction? I know you did the right thing. That was right. But why make it so miserable for me and other people in the midst of that? And so we're trying to draw him out to see, or is it because you're frustrated, you don't know how to deal with that emotion, you're feeling angry about it, and so you're just lashing out at people? Lashing out at anger is a sign of a problem. It's a childish problem, all right? Lashing out is a sign of a childish problem, and you're 9 now. You're going to be 10 this spring. So let's work on, I'd like to help you to overcome this problem. Can we work on this together? In fact, Caden, how would you like me to respond to you when you're having a problem like that? What can I do to make this easier? Often you'll get some ideas from him. But the goal here is we're going to outline a plan that's a Caden plan. And we're trying to get ideas for Caden that he's going to put into this plan. Now, I can give Caden a lot of options. I don't want to particularly tell him this is what you're going to have to do. I am going to be firm with him and say we're not going to live this way anymore. But I want to help you develop a plan. Now, I can tell you some ideas of what people do. Some people think of good things. Some people think about the next thing they're going to do. Or they say, I'm going to get through this so that I can go and do something. That's one thing you could do. And so you're writing down all these options for him. And you're saying, Caden, what works for you? Or you might say to him, so over here on the other side, we're going to say, Caden, sometimes you have done well. Give me an example of when you didn't like what was happening, but you still responded with a good attitude. As soon as you to identify something, and you as a mom can probably remember a time when things weren't going well and he surprised you by having a good attitude and he did it anyway. You want to ask this question of him, and that's the question is, what was your secret to success? When you ask the question, what was your secret to success, what you're doing is identifying things on this side that we're going to slide over into the Caden plan. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
The Caden plan is really important. It's not a plan that is delivered by mom or enforced by dad necessarily. It's a Caden plan that Caden needs to have to get to point B. Point B is a partnership. We're trying to get to point B together. We're going to make point A uncomfortable for him. That's not a partnership. That's your job. Okay, you're going to say, we're not going to live this way anymore, and so we're going to have to set up the consequences or the firmness that you're using with him. We're going to get to point B. But I want to help you get to point B in a way that's not so upsetting for you. What are some solutions that we can work on together that'll help us? I've never raised a Caden before. I need as much help as I can get, so give me some ideas. And so as we do that, we're going to identify several pieces in the Caden plan that will help Caden deal with the anger he's experiencing in the midst of his difficult situation. His difficult situation being the fact that he's got to do something he doesn't want to do. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
All right, so one other piece of this plan. So I've told you 4 parts of the plan: firmness, visioning, praying, teaching, and one more part of the plan is coaching. So you're going to be coaching him, and we've got to have this attitude of coaching with him that's going to help you get him from point A to point B. So when he starts to have a bad attitude and call you names or something, how you handle that at that moment is important. Sometimes you're going to have to say, well, wrong response. Okay, you're going to have to get disciplined now, and you go into a firmness plan. Sometimes you're going to say, well, wrong response. Come on, let's work the plan, or let's talk about this and move forward. So what we're doing is trying to help him work his plan and bring his plan into that difficult situation. That's what we're trying to do. Does that make sense to you?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does.
There is a Bible passage that says in Romans chapter 5, verse 3 and 4, 4 words. It says, suffering, that's the first word, produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. And character produces hope. I have a feeling that if you talk to Caden about this, Caden is going to feel like he doesn't have a lot of hope. So he's not working hard in his schoolwork. He's not doing well in these other areas that have to do with the challenges he faces when he doesn't get what he wants. And so inside of his heart, his hope level is decreasing. We want to raise the hope level, but we're not going to give him pie in the sky kind of pump up your attitude kind of statements. What we're going to do in your situation is you're using firmness in some ways to say we're not going to live this way anymore. Life is hard, and so the suffering of life, not getting what I want in a given situation, is suffering. And that's going to build the perseverance, but the perseverance needs a plan, and that's where we put our plan. So in the Bible passage where it says suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, character hope, what we're doing is we're putting this plan in the perseverance side of it. Now, you're asking me about anger, and that's kind of the focus of this particular webinar. But I would suggest that instead of going with anger directly, we're going to have to step back to some other issues that are going on in his heart. When we do that, we're going to see that he doesn't really have a plan for dealing with the things that are going on inside. Once we develop that plan, our focus, remember, at point B, all of those things were heart qualities. They're character qualities that we're working on. That is where we're going at point B. And we develop the character that's going to produce this hope that Caden needs. Does that make sense? That's what we're trying to do with him in order to get this all accomplished in his life. And that's what's going to be important. Now, I think we're going to have to work on anger and anger management, but we're doing it specifically in the arena of not getting what he wants. And we're developing a plan to manage that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Sometimes you're going to use firmness, and that's your consequences. A lot of times you're going to use visioning, but we've got to give him a plan. That plan, and what is it going to look like? How are we going to make this happen? And talking to him about that plan and developing that plan with him is really productive. I love developing plans with children. So think along those lines as you're working with him, and I think you're going to come up with some good ideas. It doesn't mean... So you're going to come up with a plan, and I would suggest the plan has to have 4 or 5 different parts. In fact, there might be the plan for preventing yourself from saying the mean things or the unkind things, because you know there's consequences for that, and so you're still going to be firm with him. We're going to prevent that, but there's also got to be a plan for recovery in the midst of this. That recovery is very important as well. Does that make sense?
It does. How do you do that?
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the recovery here for just a moment. And on my papers, I'm talking to Caden. What I would do is I would draw 2 lines, and these 2 lines are parallel lines, one above and one below. And those 2 lines represent normal emotions. Okay, so his emotions flow between these two lines, ups and downs. We're not trying to get rid of the emotion altogether, but normal emotions go up and down within these 2 lines. But when he gets angry and crosses the line, okay, so I put a little X on that line, that upper line. When he crosses that line, then he's acting out. And so this picture that you draw for him can help him see that we're trying to decrease 3 things. 1, we're trying to decrease the frequency of times that his emotions cross that line. How many times the emotions cross. Secondly, we're trying to decrease the intensity. That's how high he goes above there. Some children get pretty upset and they go pretty high. Thirdly, we're trying to decrease the recovery time, how long it takes for him to come back into the normal range. I draw that out for him. And I'd say, look, it looks to me like you've crossed the line. See, he tends to, my guess is that, and most kids tend to view this all as a blur, and they feel their anger is justified, and they blow up, and they don't see what's going on. What we're saying is emotions aren't bad. They need to be kept in check. They need to be kept within a normal range. And so what's happening here is he's crossing that line, and he's acting out. And at that point, he's done the wrong thing. And that's why we're bringing consequences. We're not bringing consequences into his life because he's angry. Because anger isn't wrong. We're bringing consequences into his life because he's acted out of that anger. So what we're trying to do, and our goal with him, is to say, come on, let's work on this. Let's develop a plan together to prevent this from moving forward. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Just got to write down some things here. What I'd really like to hear, Charma, is I'd really appreciate some feedback here from you after you work this plan with Caden. I'd like to get an email back from you at some point or something that tells me here's what we're doing and here's how we're getting there, so that we may even at some point want to do another webinar with you to go to the next step and try to move forward, because we really want Caden to develop a plan to limit some of this acting out that's going on. I do think your consequences are good that you're using. The spanking, we might get a little bit old for the spanking, but I still think you're being firm at this point, and the firmness is important. I don't think we need the yelling necessarily, but we do need to draw some line with consequences, forcing him to earn them back by demonstrating cooperation will be helpful at sometimes. So instead of just taking his whatever away for a week, we're saying, I'm going to take away your privilege of playing video games until you earn it back by showing me that you can do the right thing. So that might work. Or if you're not handling it well, you're going to have to go to bed early. Those kinds of things. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So have him earn it back. That'll help you to use a more of a heart-based approach as you're moving forward. Okay?
Okay.
I just need to jot down a couple things here before we open the phones. If someone has a question, and there's a way to raise your hand or something, you can go ahead and do that, or you can type a question in the chat. Well, I just jot down some things about this particular family.
And I've been writing all my notes as well, so I've got about 3 pages worth.
Well, good. You're going to want to sit down with your husband and take the ideas I've shared with you and try to bring those together in some kind of a plan that'll work for you. And I think it's not going to be easy. You're going to keep adjusting the plan, but bring Caden into the picture, and I think that'll go a long way. All right, we have a question from Natalie. Natalie's saying that she has a 9-year-old, and when her 9-year-old is angry, in fact, I think, what caller did we say she was? Was that, she called number 1? Bring her back on the line. Natalie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, have you been able to
Hello?
hear what we've been talking? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Were you able to hear what we were talking about with Charma?
Yes, all of them.
Were you, were there some things that you heard there that you found helpful as you're working with your son?
Absolutely. I've been actually taking notes, the plan, the recovery time, emotions, things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you had a particular question about writing or something. You want to rephrase that question or tell me what the question is so I can address that for you?
Okay. Well, one day he was mad at his teacher for something he thought was injustice to him, and therefore his teacher said, okay, why don't you write down your feelings and all that at school? It was happening at school. So at the heat of the moment, he was writing, and he wrote things like, I wish you would DIE, he would get tortured, I'd assassinate him, I had to spell some words because my daughter's here, my little one, 4-year-old. Anyway, so I don't know if that's okay. I come home and I see this. This is my first time seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know my son's capable of these things.
Okay. All right. Having a child write about their feelings can be helpful, but in your child's situation, what he's choosing to do is write about revenge. So it's probably unproductive for him to be engaged in a writing exercise for his particular anger situation. The purpose for a writing exercise when you're angry is to answer questions like, what did I do wrong? Or why was that wrong? Or what am I going to do differently next time? Or questions like that are often helpful. But he's been treated unjustly, and so he feels like he's a victim, and so he wants to lash back and hurt somebody. So having him write at that point in that situation isn't productive. And maybe the teacher didn't know exactly what was going on there. I'm not exactly sure, but I wouldn't encourage a child to act out the revenge on paper, nor would I encourage him to go out and scream in the forest or in a pillow or kick this furniture or something like that to get the energy out. That's not what we're doing when we're doing a heart-based approach to parenting. What's happening is that your son believes he was mistreated. And let's assume that he was mistreated, okay? Because we're going to look at it from his perspective. When a child's mistreated, they need to know how to process this. Well, Natalie, let me ask you a question. Are you a Christian?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you a passage from the Bible that I would use with your son if I were working with him at 9 years old, because I think it would be very helpful for him. This passage comes from 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 18 to 25. And it's in a passage, and I explain to children as I'm reading it to them, because I'll let them read it right out of my Bible, and we'll talk about it together. It's a passage that's talking about slaves and masters. We do not have slaves and masters in our Western United States society. We don't have that, okay? But in the situations, it's talking there about an unjust master. So someone who's mistreating the slave, and Peter is writing into that situation to give some advice to in that difficult situation. How's a slave supposed to think when he's being mistreated? He feels hopeless. He's feeling abandoned. He's feeling like the world's not right. And that's the same feeling that children experience when they're being treated unjustly. By a bully, by a teacher, even sometimes by a parent. They're feeling mistreated. I'm not saying that's happening in your life. I'm just, other people are listening to this too. So when I'm helping a young child or even a 9-year-old understand this, I want them to understand that the feelings that they have of being treated unjustly are not wrong. The feelings themselves are not wrong, but what are you going to do with them? And the verse 18 is the key verse. It says that if you're suffering unjustly and your conscience is facing toward God, okay, that's kind of a literal translation from the Greek that I I'm coming up with. You can, the NIV, the New International Version, says conscious of God. The King James Version says your conscience toward God, but really it means that your conscience is facing toward God. In other words, you're doing the right thing even though you're mistreated. That warms the heart of God. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to take the problem that's happening in your son's life and we're going to use some solutions that are spiritual solutions to bring into this particular problem. So whenever there's a problem in life, it's caused by three different situations that we're dealing with, three different areas. It's either going to be biological, or it's going to be reactive, or it's going to be spiritual. So those become the causes of a problem of depression or anger or so on. But when we have those three problems, we have three different causes. We have biological causes, we have reactive or coping kinds of problems, and we have spiritual causes. That's not the problem here. What I'm trying to do for you is I'm trying to show you that there are three buckets of solutions to the problems we face. There's a biological bucket, and so that's not in your case, but in some cases we tell children or talk to them about eating right and exercising, going to bed early, or so on. Other times we're talking about reactive solutions. We're talking about how to think rightly, and that's where we can help your son quite a bit, is how do we respond rightly to these situations. But I also like to draw on spiritual solutions for children's problems. And in this case, we're going to 1 Peter chapter 2 in order to help him see that when you do the right thing, even when you're being mistreated, that's commendable before God, and you'll be blessed because of that. And then it goes right on in that passage. I'd read the rest of it with him. He's saying, just like Christ Jesus did when he suffered, that when he was insulted, he didn't throw insults back. When he was threatened, he didn't retaliate. But instead, what did he do in that verse? In verse 23, it says he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. He gave it to the Lord. Now, this spiritual solution is something that your son has access to that other people don't have access to. So he can understand that God is eventually going to judge the whole world. Anybody who's been unjust at that point will get what's due to them. And now you're drawing on spiritual solutions to help him. We saw a number of times in the Bible where people were treated unjustly, and so you can draw on some of those as well. What we're doing is we're relying on spiritual solutions at that point to deal with the emotional challenges that he's facing. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
And that
but
will
what
help.
happens in the meantime with the emotions that he's feeling? I mean, how do you get it? We want to get it out of him, the anger, but then how in a healthy way?
Okay, good. So what we wanted him to understand is that anger is, let's talk to him in terms of anger being energy. Anger is energy that comes into your body when something happens. There's four causes for anger, all right? And he's just dealing with one of them. One of the causes of anger is unmet expectations. Another one is blocked goals. A third one is unfairness. Okay, and a fourth one is, I forget. What's the fourth, do you know? Forget it, don't worry about it. There's four of them, but I don't remember the fourth one at the moment. But one of them is unfairness, and that's what he's experiencing right now at this moment. It's unfair. So now he has this extra energy welling up inside of him. So we have to talk to him in terms of managing anger as energy. What are we going to do with that? That doesn't mean we have to get the energy out by screaming or writing or kicking or hitting or lashing out or something. Sometimes we get the energy out by self-control. Proverbs says that a fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. He ought to memorize that verse or at least see it, because it'll help him know that the solutions here are going to be solutions that will allow him to respond better in the midst of these difficult situations using self-control strategies, not just using strategies that resort to lashing out or getting it out. So when we say deal with the energy, we're not saying it has to come out some way by writing, venting, or so on. We're saying we're controlling that energy. We would say to children, well, there's a lot of ways to do that. I was working with my grandson who was having some trouble with anger issues, and I was saying, hey, look, let me give you some ideas. One is you could take a deep breath. Because when you take a deep breath, it releases some of that energy. Another thing that you can do is walk around the room a little bit, or get up and walk a bit. Another thing you can do is you could take a break and sit down for a little bit and let the emotions settle. Time often allows those to settle, but we're doing that with some new information. So one of the things that can relieve some of that tension, that energy, is this concept we're talking about suffering unjustly. He's only 9, but if he can learn at 9 years old how to handle injustice in life, He'll do much better as he gets older, because we all have to deal with injustice in life. Sometimes what he's going to do is he's going to take a stand for righteousness. I don't have a problem with that. Self-defense, I don't have a problem if he has to fight at some point, if somebody's attacking him. All of that's fine. All we're saying is there's another solution here that has to do with him being violated, and being able to deal with that with some spiritual resources, and recognize God's going to address this later on in the situation. So all of that can help him to process this and deal with the emotion. Does that make sense to you, Natalie?
Yes, it does. So my two questions are, what's the verse again that you mentioned regarding self-control?
That's in Proverbs, and I don't know exactly where that is. It says, a fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. That's the verse. And if you look up fool in a concordance, you're liable to find that verse so that you can address it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I can look it up online. And second thing is, so I'm hearing you say that it's okay that the energy or the anger is not completely out the way the world would tell you. Express yourself, express yourself.
Yeah. That's right.
So you're saying there are other ways of getting it out in a just more passive way, for lack of a better word?
Well, yes. Okay, so the world will tell you that in order to deal with anger, you need to get it out. Otherwise, you're going to have repressed anger. That's not God's solution for repressed anger. Okay, we're not trying to repress his anger. What we're trying to do is help him control it. Self-control is the God-given solution to the problems that people face with their anger. So that's what we're trying to teach him, is how to pull that down using self-control strategy. So that's a whole new avenue for him to recognize that he can manage this with self-control. And by the way, you have to understand that God gives spiritual resources, and self-control is one piece of the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5. So on the one hand, we have human self-control. We're going to try to deal with this, but also we have spiritual control that allows us to move forward in that regard. Joanne?
Scott, we've got another question here. Someone is asking, how would a parent get specific help with writing a plan for a child, and how would that plan benefit the family as a whole?
Okay, very good question. Let's talk about the last part, the family as a whole. One of the keys to a successful family is not just having individuals who are successful in the family, but having a family plan or a family ability to solve problems or deal with emotions or whatever. We're writing a book, The 10 Traits of a Successful Family, and what we're trying to say in the book is that it's not good enough for everybody in the family to have an individual plan for dealing with emotions. We have to, as a family, be able to deal with those. It's not good enough for everybody to know how to solve problems in a family. We're also trying to solve problems together in a family. We're emotionally connected. So when dad and mom are fighting, the child feels the emotion and pulls back. Or maybe mom is trying to discipline a child who's yelling or upset, a 9-year-old, and the 4-year-old's feeling it because we're emotionally connected. So a successful family is going to have a way to solve these problems as a family, not just as individuals. And so that's going to be we have to process it. We're going to teach the 4-year-old how to process this as well. So we've got to have some solutions in that regard. Now, let's go back to the first part of that question.
Yeah, how do you write a plan? How do you get help to write a specific plan?
Okay. Let's see, how do you get help to do it? You're going to have to do it on your own. I'm going to show you how to do it with these 5 different parts. You're going to have to ask yourself these questions. I mean, certainly I can help you develop a plan. You can come into these webinars on a regular basis. That's what I'm doing with families, is helping them write specific plans for their children. But my goal is, by doing this with a specific families, other people are watching so that you'll be able to write your own plan. And over time, as you're watching these, you'll see me solving several different plans using these 5 different pieces of a good plan. They are firmness, visioning, prayer, teaching, and coaching. All of those are part of the plan. So what I'm trying to do as I'm thinking about a plan, and this is what you can do too, is you're starting with point A on a map. What is your child doing wrong that's creating problems? Usually that's behavior you're looking at, but ask some hard questions. What is his problem? He's selfish, or he's demanding, or he's unkind, or whatever. So that's what we see. Where do we want him to be at point B? How are we going to get there? That's the teaching part. Why do we want to get there? That's the visioning part. We're praying in order to ask God to help us with all of this as a family. to move from point A to point B. Firmness makes point A uncomfortable. We're not going to live this way anymore. So all of those things move us forward. I think you're going to get a plan by just praying and asking God for wisdom and with a piece of paper, an action plan worksheet with those 5 words on it and trying to develop some pieces of that. But you can look in some resources. We have resources that help you develop a plan and what that looks like. You might read other parenting books that aren't ours and take pieces of that for your plan. You might get some advice from different people as you're talking to them, and you're going to get pieces to the plan. I would suggest you ask the child to be involved in the planning process, especially children that are 6 and above, or sometimes even younger children. What we're saying is, come on, you got a problem. This problem isn't going to work for you here when you get to be an adult. So let's develop some solutions now. And what we do in our ministry is we take adult solutions and break them down to a child's level in order to help the child learn how to respond better. So all of that becomes part of the plan. And you can do it as parents. I think we're continually working on plans with our kids. It just takes some practice and some insight to try to make all of that happen.
Okay.
All right, so what we're trying to do here, let me just review, both in Natalie's situation and also in Charma's situation, we have 9-year-old boys who are struggling with anger. And in both cases, we're trying to develop a plan, but the plan's a little bit different for each one of them. What we're trying to do is go back in, and we're going to use firmness, okay? So I don't want you to think we're just doing talk therapy or something like that with kids. But the firmness says we can't live this way anymore. We're not going to allow this to continue. Very important part of your plan. But we can't just stop there. Many parents just stop with that part of the plan. What we're saying is we've got to do more than that. We've got to teach our children, and we're going to focus on part B. What does point B look like? Once we know that and we're teaching children how to get to point B, then the plan starts to make sense. So we're moving forward. Think about the words you're using. Are the words you're using tying you into point A, or are they tying you into point B? Those words will get you in the right direction as you're moving forward. So I'd encourage you to do those things as you're trying to develop your own personal plan. What we're going to do here is we're going to send you an evaluation about your time with us. We'd appreciate your feedback about what was helpful in this particular webinar. And as our thank you for doing that, we'll give you a special gift certificate at our web store if you'd like to use that as well. If you'd like more information about developing heart-based plans or working on the heart of a child, we've got lots of resources. We've written books about those. I think Joanne's kind of typed in some different resources along the way here as we've been talking. But visit us on our website, biblicalparenting.org. We'll have more webinars coming up in the future. We won't have any next week because I'm going to Africa for a couple of weeks to spend time with my own children that are there, and that's where they live. And so I'll be spending time with them. But then when we come back, we'll be doing some more webinars right after that, and we'll be looking for featured parents. If you're interested in being a featured parent and developing a specific action plan for you, write to us. You can write to us at parent@biblicalparenting.org and just write wanting an action plan or something in the subject, and we'll get it right to and we'll start dialoguing with you about it. We've got lots of topics that we can talk about, and we'll invite other people to be a part of that. Lots more to come. God bless you, folks, as you continue on and do that hard work of parenting.